Ciao, and welcome to Immersion Travel Italy, where we don't just visit Italy, we experience it. I'm Caterina Ferrara, travel author and festival enthusiast, taking you behind the scenes to some of Italy's most unforgettable traditions. From candlelight processions through medieval streets to sizzling food festivals bursting with flavor, I'll share insider tips, hidden gems, and stories you won't find in any guidebook. So grab your espresso and let's dive into the heart and soul of Italy, one festival, one town at a time. Today is a special day here in Italy. It's Ferragosto, and we're celebrating in style with a fantastic guest. Join me as Michele Frolla from the Intrepid Guide, and together we're going to have a lively chat, a conversation. We're going to share some fun, easy Italian phrases that will enhance any trip you take to Italy. Whether you're exploring the romantic canals of the north or the sun-soaked shores of the south, these interactions with Italians and their language are absolutely precious, and they sincerely appreciate a simple please, thank you, good morning. These words can literally open doors to something you may not normally get to see. And in this episode, we'll go even a bit beyond the basics with phrases to help you connect, feel confident, and immerse yourself in la dolce vita. So welcome, Michele, or should I call you Michele, as we would say in Italian?
Thank you so much for having me, Caterina. I can't say your name without pronouncing it the Italian way. But yeah, my name, you would pronounce it Michele, but it does cause, naturally, it does cause confusion because it's Michele with one L. And there's a bit of a story behind that. But I'm sure we can jump into that later on. But you can say Michele, but I like Michele or Michela, whatever you prefer.
Very good. I would like to know how you started the idea of the Intrepid Guide. I love your Instagram videos. I've watched them for years, and they're always just upbeat and clever ways to engage with the Italian language.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so it's a bit of an origin story. I don't know if you have the time, but so I started the Intrepid Guide when I moved to London from Italy. So to give you a bit of a background, I am half Italian, half Australian. I grew up in Australia, and I'm the youngest of three girls. And as per tradition, your Italian parents pass on the names of their parents to their children. And because I'm the youngest of three girls, my dad had run out of options. So my dad is Italian, from Puglia originally. After two girls, he's like, how am I going to pass on my dad's name, so my nonno, my grandfather? So he thought, right, we're in Australia, it doesn't matter. I'll just give her the name of my nonno, Michele, and no one will know. And we'll just pronounce it Michele, no big deal. Great one. Thanks, Dad. So I have this name which carries a lot of heritage and it's part of my identity. And I guess that's sort of what spurred me on later in life. So my nonna I was quite close to when I was younger. My nonna had already passed away, my grandmother, when I was about 3. So I don't have too many memories of her. But it was my nonno that left like a bit of a mark on me in terms of like his name, his origins. I was always curious about him. I couldn't speak his language, his dialect of Italian. My dad didn't teach us growing up. And so I always had to use my dad as the translator. So my dad would always translate conversations, and I would always feel like embarrassed and ashamed that I'm named after, my nonno, yet I can't speak his language.
Sure.
So even at a young age, that kind of left an impression on me. So when I was about 15, 16, my nonno passed away, and it was sort of like that light bulb moment where I'm just like, right, I really want to learn this language. I'm going to get serious, in the only way that I knew how. And that sort of got the ball rolling in terms of me starting to learn Italian. And in my early 20s, I had reached a B1 level. Just by living in Australia, I'd reached that level of like self-study and courses and all the things.
Yeah.
So I moved to Italy, I moved to Rome, and I had run out of visa options, unfortunately, because even though my dad was born in Italy, he was naturalized Australian, so he lost all those rights to get citizenship. So after 3 years, I ran out of options. It was a wonderful time living in Rome. I learned so much, improved my Italian, and just opened my eyes to the world, really, and different ways of living and different places to travel to. So after the 3 years, I moved to London, where I am now. And the idea for the Intrepid Guide is the whole idea that I had learned from living in Italy, that just by learning the language, you can open up so many doors to new connections, to meeting new people, connecting with people in a way that I wasn't able to do in Australia. Like I I was Australian, but I felt Italian at the same time. And I don't know, there was a missing piece, and that's what I went to discover by living in Italy. And I missed that sort of daily challenge of learning about a language, a culture, a people, and just the rhythm of life that was so different to what I knew. And I started the Intrepid Guide as a way to help other people learn at least the basics of the language to any of the destinations that they wanted to travel to. So it's fundamentally the whole idea is language learning for. So you don't need to be fluent if you want to go to Iceland or Norway or the Netherlands or wherever. Just being like polite and using the basics and having fun with it. It really just sort of, it makes people's faces light up. Their eyes are like surprised. You know, they might start speaking to you in their language, but it's just a sort of a moment of connection that I just loved. And I wanted to share that with other people. And then over the years that evolved, and I decided to just focus on Italy and Italian, my two biggest passions. And that's when I created Intrepid Italian. So now I post weekly lessons on YouTube, daily lessons on Instagram. I've got a whole bunch of courses for those that are serious or just dabbling in the language for travel. And yeah, I'm absolutely loving being able to share my heritage and also reassure people that it's never too late to get started. Henry Ford said it best, is like, you're only old if you stop learning. I feel like that's something to cling on to, because it is so true. And there's so much that can be gained from, you know, personal development as well. Like, you sort of gain a new level of confidence. Like, when you're learning a language and using it, you go through those motions and the insecurities, but on the other side, the experience that you get when you make that connection, it's just, it's magic. I love it.
Do you remember the first conversation that you had in Italy in Italian? I remember I was in a taxi cab. We had landed in Milan. My husband and son were in the back, and I sat in the front just to try and talk to this taxi driver. I was so nervous, but he was so kind and just loved that I was trying. So, yeah.
Absolutely. It's so similar. I don't remember the exact moment, but there was one particular early moment that I had when I had just moved there. I feel like it was a bit of like a full circle moment. Before I moved to Rome, I had gone on a 2-week trip with a friend who was also of Italian heritage. And I remember we got a taxi, and I was just frustrated that I couldn't speak to the taxi driver. And that was the moment where I'm like, right, I'm going to step up my Italian even more. And then it was when I moved there that I got in another taxi cab and I spoke to the driver. And the first thing I asked him was, what is your favorite place in Rome? And that was like, I remembered the previous trip before I had moved, being in a taxi and not being able to speak to the taxi driver, and then now being able to ask a local, what is your local tip? Like, what is your favorite place in Rome? And he said Gianicolo, which is the view over Rome. So yeah, those moments are really precious.
They are. And speaking of favorite places, my Venice book is going to launch today on Amazon. So I was wondering if you had a favorite hidden corner in Venice you might share.
Oh, well, congratulations. That's so exciting.
Thank you.
Venice is a world unto its own. It's a fantastic city, place. I spent a month there a couple of years ago, and I created pretty much a documentary documenting each of the sestieri. So each of the parts or neighborhoods of Venice are made up of neighborhoods that just have their own character and own history. But there's one area which I don't feel gets enough attention, and that's the area of Dossoduro. That is the area where you can visit one of the shipyards or boatyards for making gondolas. It's called Squero di San Trovaso. And it's really cool to see how generations that are making, and there's only 3 of them left, 3 of these gondola shipyards, the process that they go through of making gondolas. Of all places, you've got to go in Venice. So that's Squero di San Trovaso.
And right across from there is the Baccheri, which is one of the places where you can get cicchetti and sit along the stone wall. It's just either stand or sit. There's not not a bunch of tables there. But the cicchetti are wonderful, and the seagulls are dangerous because we did see them grab a sandwich right out of someone's napkin standing there. So they'll just come right and get it. You got to be defensive of your cicchetti.
Yeah, no, that was a really cool experience. You can watch them from the outside from that bar that you mentioned, but you can also join an organized tour, and that was really informative. Getting up close and just learning all the things about the different types of wood that they use, how long it takes. But yeah, there's only 3 of these that survive now, these 3 shipyards. And this is the only one that I knew where to go to find it. But yeah, at its peak, there were like 10,000 gondolas in Venice. So now there are like 400 or so mode of transportation, and now it's just sort of just for the tourists.
Speaking of another really fantastic special thing in Venice that language opened up to me, I was studying sort of the history of Venice. And one of the things that Venice had in the past that they were famous for was called the battiloro. These are the people that beat the gold oro in town. And there was only one battiloro left in Venice. And I just contacted them. And I said, I know you're not on the tourist track, but I'm really interested in your, historic, they've been there for 100 years. And so they let me come over. And their office is in Titian's house on the first level. So you're entering into the house of Titian, a famous artist of Venice, where they currently have their family shop. It's a mom, dad, and daughter. And they were actually closing it up because the dad wants to be in retirement in Trento. And they were selling the building, selling the business. They tried to have a machine do the business. They worked with the University of Bologna, but it literally takes the dad to beat the gold that they've been doing in the family for hundreds of years. So just really special historical experiences there in Venice for sure. Well, we probably have to get started with a little bit of our Italian lesson. Where do you recommend we start? Dove cominciamo?
The B levels is the intermediate, and then you've got the advanced students in the C category. So B1 is also an important milestone because it's when you kind of really get to that point where you feel more confident in your conversation level. It's also the level that's required if you're going to go if you're applying for university or if you're applying for any sort of visa that has a language requirement attached to it. So I have courses that go up to that level, and also a bunch of like 30-day challenges to really like hone in on tricky parts of the language. But for the whole methodology that I use to approach language learning is actually based off the 80-20 principle. So I don't know if your listeners are familiar with this idea, but basically the 80-20 principle comes from Vilfredo Pareto, who was Italian, and he discovered in the 1800s that the 80% of the land in Italy was owned by 20% of the population. And then it was years later that an economist, Joseph M. Duran, noticed that this ratio of 80-20 could be applied to other areas of our lives. So say for example, you open up Netflix or you watch the news, there's always of all the news, of all the shows in the world, the 20% is always on that front page, on the home page, and it's getting 80% of the attention. And this 80-20 or 70-30 or even 60-40 ratio can be applied to language learning in the sense that you don't need to learn all the words in the dictionary. There are hundreds of thousands of words. But in our active vocabulary, you only really need to have about 20%. So I applied this principle of the 80-20 rule to language learning, both for travel, but also for those that are serious and want to get to an A1, A2, B1 intermediate level. So what does that mean? For travel, for example, what sort of conversations do you think you're going to be having? You're going to introduce yourself. You're going to be ordering food. You're going to be ordering gelato. You're going to be buying tickets, asking for directions, asking where the bathroom is, saying hello, please, and thank you. This is the stuff that you're going to be using a lot. So that's your 20% right there that you should be focusing on when you're learning Italian. And then if you're more serious and you want to go to a more conversational level, it's right, what tenses do I need to learn at a beginner level? I don't need to learn the congiuntivo, the subjunctive.
Passato remoto.
The passato remoto, which is the historic past, something that doesn't really exist in English. So we kind of, we use that as a principle, a lens to look at the language through. It makes it less daunting, it makes it more achievable, and it can make things really fun. So for example, if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed at learning the language, I always love to start with sharing these little tricks that you can use to apply to just unlock vocabulary that you didn't know that you were able to tap into. So say, for example, we've got words like attention in English, or communication, or important, or incredible. These can easily be transformed with just a tweak of the pronunciation. So attention becomes attenzione, communication becomes comunicazione, important becomes importante, incredible becomes incredibile. Like all of a sudden, it's not so foreign after all. And these are cognates, you know, literally a word that's in one language that has the same root as in another language. So obviously we're talking about Latin here, but there are so many like little tools and tricks that you can use to unlock a language and really like use it as like the first step into like, oh, this isn't so bad after all. And it's really encouraging. And I feel that's really important, especially if you're absolutely new to language learning, like I was. I didn't know what a verb was. I didn't know what a noun was or an adjective. Definitely didn't know what the subjunctive was. Like this is stuff that my generation, we didn't really learn. My mum did. But for me, I was like, sorry, like, what are you talking about? The subject and the object of the sentence? I have no idea. So I don't assume that any of my students have learned a foreign language before, and there's no judgment. Like it's literally, I know how it feels, and don't worry, we're going to do this together. So I really like to break things down in just a simple, manageable chunk. So what is a noun? It's anything that you can place a or an in front of. A car, an apple. What's a verb? Anything you can put to in front of. To eat, to swim, to talk. What's an adjective? Anything you put is in front of, is big, is small, is beautiful. So if you just sort of like simplify it as opposed to, you know, teachers that used to say, a verb is a doing word. Like, what do you mean it's a doing word? Like to be, like I'm doing being? What do you mean? Like that always tripped me up. But yeah.
So do you think having the sort of polite words is an important skill, regardless of Italy, Spain, wherever you're going?
Yeah, like courtesy words like hello, please, and thank you. I think it's a really good opener to a conversation and a closer. You don't need to learn everything in between if you're just traveling and you're only going to be there for a few days or a week. But just the buongiorno, I think, is really sweet. You can also say ciao, but that's more informal, and you will hear that being said to you. But I think it's just a touch more effort has been put in on your behalf. If you say something like buongiorno, it's good morning, and just a really nice way to open and start a conversation. It really sets the tone for how that person will treat you. If they see that you've made an effort, you can stumble through the pronunciation of your letter R's. Like in Australia, we don't really pronounce the letter R. So for me, I have to make an effort. But they love that. They appreciate it, just like you would. If you can see someone like, you know, they want to talk to you, but they're having a bit of trouble, that's all right. You're like, I mean, I love it. I absolutely love it. Being stopped in the street, I was helping out a French couple, and I'm just like, you take your time. I'll let you do your thing, and then I'll help you to come to the solution that we're looking for a bus stop. I just think that is wonderful moments to slow down for and just savor and enjoy.
Agreed. And I mean, no matter what you do in Italy, you're going to need to know please and thank you, because you're going to order at a restaurant, you're going to check into a hotel, you're going to want a gelato. And so I think those, you know, just the very basic words like that, vorrei, I would like, vorrei, you know, grazie, prego, are all important. And sometimes, frankly, you'll be standing somewhere, or let's say you walk into, you know, a bar and you want to order a cafe, and they just say prego, and you're kind of like, that means you're welcome.
It's such a versatile word. It's so good. Prego is a great word to learn. There are so many uses for it. For example, prego. So you might be queuing up, and they might say prego, like it's like who's next. Prego can also be used to say you're welcome. Prego can also be used to get someone's attention, like instead of saying scusa or mi scusi, you could say prego, like just changing the intonation. It can mean so many things. Literally, it means like I'm praying, but it's also a really good connection to think about how Italian isn't so dissimilar from English. So if any of you, if you're a fan of Jane Austen, this is like a bit of an aha moment that I had learning Italian. I always used to watch the BBC series of Pride and Prejudice with my mum, which I absolutely adore. And I noticed that the father said to his daughter, Lizzie, I'm glad you are come back. And I just thought, because in Italian, you don't say, you know, I have gone. You say, I am gone. And I thought English was exactly the same way. We spoke that way in the time of like the 1700s, like Jane Austen's English. And that changed over time to become I have gone, or I went, sorry. So in Italian, you have to sort of get into that 1700s. And another thing they do is they use prego, which is the equivalent of saying pray, tell in like 1700. English.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
Like they don't say, "Hey, tell me." They're just like, "Pray tell. How was your journey?" Like it's sort of that old English. It's just the way that Italian is, and I think it's really nice to be able to find those little bridges that connect the two languages. So that's what I help my students do.
Think if someone goes to, Rome, Florence, Venice, they can usually find an English speaker. We were recently in Puglia in May, and there are a lot of places in Puglia where either, they don't want to speak to in English, maybe they're a little nervous, or they simply don't speak English. So just depending on, how deep your journey is going to go into Italy, learning Italian, it really can make a difference. We have been in situations where we needed to ask for directions, which are, one of the very first things that you'll learn, in a travel Italian course or in any Italian course, right, left, how to ask, for help when you need directions. And we have needed that. And you would think with Google Maps, why would you need that? But there are times where Google Maps isn't working, there's no cell service or whatever. So there are times where you need those very basics.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's fun too. The first thing I always tell my students is don't sort of let the anticipation or the nerves build up that you don't say any word of Italian before you get to Italy. Like for me, I warm up even talking to the flight attendants. If they're Italian, I'd be like, I will greet them, buongiorno, buonasera, whatever it is. When I land at the airport, I will do the same with the customs officers, like the passport security, sorry, when they're checking like the passport. And they're usually quite, they're a bit bored and, they're a bit sort of, not loving life. But I come in and I'm smiling and I'll say, buongiorno. And then they'll look up and they're like you speak Italian, and they're looking at me and my name, and it's just another human moment. So really just have fun with the language. Don't take it too seriously, like, oh, what if they think I'm an idiot because, I didn't pronounce it properly? It doesn't matter. Like they will help you and they will adore you for it.
Now, did you ever recommend the language sort of exchange apps? My husband calls them, dating apps for language learners. They're not really dating apps. But I have met, some really great friends. I've got friends in Naples, Milan, and then every Saturday we get on, we talk for 30 minutes in English to help them with their English, and then 30 minutes in Italian to help me use my Italian every week. And I do recommend if somebody gets to that level where they're B1, B2, that they do some research and maybe try that. Because one of the things my teacher told me is, you meet with me for an hour a week, you need to be talking more in Italian. I would listen to TV, listen to podcasts in Italian, but I wouldn't be using it enough. So what do you recommend for that for language learners who maybe are a little further along and ready to use their Italian?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you got to find whatever works for you, right? Like there are so many different ways to skin a cat, so to speak, and you just have to find what works for you. Like if you feel that you want to connect with someone who's a teacher and they're a professional, and you just want to sit down and be in their hands for the next, half an hour to 45 to 60 minutes. Or if you want to have like a pen pal sort of situation and talk to people where, you're just sort of chatting and there's no sort of judgment or correction happening. There are pros and cons to both experiences. And I think a little bit of everything is good, like at least to try and see what really resonates with you. The other thing that you can do is obviously go on a language immersion retreat or have like an exchange. If you go into a language school, you can go on a language holiday, which is something that I did in the earlier stages of when I was learning Italian. There are so many platforms, there are so many apps. It just depends on your time and availability. Like you could have scheduling issues if you're in Australia and then if they're in Italy in your schedule. Like for my courses, I just say, look, you have lifetime access. You can learn as and when you want to. You're not bound by any live lessons. So, and then, you supplement that. I always recommend to my students exactly what you're saying is supplement that with speaking. Go to your local Italian restaurant and have a chat with the pizzaiolo, the pizza maker, or the staff. Just wherever there is an opportunity in your local community, even if there isn't, a big one, there's usually an Italian something. An Italian barbershop, an Italian supermarket, an Italian restaurant. Those were the places where I really polished my Italian in Australia before moving to Italy. So it's not impossible. Like if you really want to learn Italian, you will find a way in your local community to practice the language. So go for it.
Yes, that's fabulous. If you just had 24 hours in a new city, what do you do? If you go to a new city in Italy, what do you go visit? What do you find?
Well, for me personally, I love a rooftop view. I will go to a church with a bell tower and I will climb to the top. I'm all like, I don't know how many times I've done it, but I've always gone to the top of St. Peter's Dome in Rome, the same as
Yes,
the Duomo in
spectacular. Yeah.
Firenze. Like wherever there is a chance for me to be on a terrazza or a campanile, like a bell tower, I am there. I just think it's such a great way to orientate yourself with the city, and it's another like perspective as well. I love it.
Yeah, I agree. And when I find a campanile with an ascensore, an elevator, it is a
Yeah.
victory because we're used to climbing the 1100 stairs to the top. So I'm like, "Ah, this one, we were just in Lecce, elevator, jackpot, because we were planning to climb either way. So also,
Yeah.
my last question is just for fun. If you could instantly become fluent in any language you don't already speak, what would you pick?
Yeah, this is a real tricky one because I feel like I have three for different reasons. Do you want to know all three, or should I
Yeah,
just
sure.
pick
Go for
one?
three if you've got three in your mind.
Well, for me, the language I started, but I haven't felt like I haven't given enough time to, was Norwegian. I was inspired to learn Norwegian for a couple of reasons. I traveled there three times before I'm like, I really want to learn it. And I got to like an A2, B1 level, but it wasn't quite enough for it to really stick. But the reason I really want to learn Norwegian is because a friend of mine who is Norwegian, I remember her teaching me a phrase, and I thought, I've never heard of this before in another language. And it really just sort of caught my interest. Plus, it's very melodic. So the phrase was, I don't say, when you see someone, like we see each other today, and then I'll see you again tomorrow. In Norwegian, what I would say to you is, takk for sist, which means thank you for last time. In the sense of thank you for the last time I saw you and we spent that time together. Like I really enjoyed it. So they don't just say hello or how are you going and all of that. It's a reminder and yeah, a piece of, an offering of gratitude, I guess, for the last time that we saw each other. And I thought that is amazing. I really like that, especially from a language that doesn't use like please and thank you in the same way that we use it a lot in English. They're a bit more direct and they don't mess around with like saying please and thank you as much as we do. But for them to say thank you for last time, I'm like, oh, there's something to this language. I want to dig a little bit deeper. And then the other two, Mandarin Chinese, I just feel like it would really sort of open up my perspective on the Chinese culture and their history. I think there's so much there to be explored. And
Certainly.
I think it just really sort of, that language is the bridge, is the gap to connect with other people, to understand their point of view. And the same thing with Arabic. I did dabble in Arabic for a little bit when I traveled to Egypt, and I really enjoyed it. There was one particular phrase, again, there's always one particular phrase, which is like the caveat. And that phrase was inshallah, which basically it sort of means like, God willing. And you say that when you say goodbye to someone, they will respond to you, inshallah, meaning, God forbid, I don't know if we'll see each other again, but if God is willing, then we will see each other again. And I just thought, again, there's like that cultural element to the language that there's just so much that can be learned just by, because language is culture. So I feel like there's so
Yes.
much that can be gained just by speaking and learning the languages of other countries, other people, to connect, again, to connect.
Yes, it's all about connections. Thank you so much for joining me today, Michelle. It was fabulous to have you. And I hope everyone will follow Intrepid Italian on Instagram, on YouTube, because there is so much content that you offer just on a daily basis. So I sincerely appreciate your visit. Thank you so much.
Grazie mille. This was a real thrill, and I'm just happy to share this with you. So thank you again. Grazie.
Grazie, grazie. Ciao, ciao.